The moment Marcus Reed signed the divorce papers, he didn't just end a marriage. He erased the woman he thought had nothing left to offer him. That same night, at a private family dinner, his mother poured a glass of leftover wine over his ex-wife's head while his new partner laughed and recorded it. To them, she was just a quiet, failed woman who had been living off Marcus's success. What none of them knew was that the woman standing there in silence had already signed off on a decision that would cost them everything they thought they owned. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. 3 years earlier, none of this looked inevitable, but tonight everything had already been decided. The dining room felt too bright for what it had become. Crystal lights reflected off polished wood. The table was set like a celebration, not the end of a marriage. Linda Reed had arranged every detail herself. Perfect plates, perfect glasses, perfect illusion. Marcus sat at the head of the table, relaxed in a way he hadn't been in months. Beside him, Vanessa leaned close, her hand resting lightly on his arm as if she had always belonged there. She wore confidence like jewelry, the kind that didn't need to be explained. Across from them stood Elena. She hadn't taken a seat. Her coat was still on. Simple, clean, unremarkable. Exactly the way Linda liked to describe her. "You could at least dress for the occasion," Linda said, her voice sharp enough to cut through the room without effort. "It's the last dinner you'll ever have with this family." Elena didn't respond. Her hands rested loosely at her sides. No shaking, no pleading, just stillness. Marcus didn't look at her at first. He poured himself another drink, then leaned back slightly. "It doesn't have to be dramatic," he said. "We both knew this wasn't working. That was the closest thing to kindness he had offered all night." Vanessa let out a quiet laugh. "I mean, let's be honest," she added, glancing at Elena. "Some people just don't grow into the life they marry into." Elena met her gaze for a second. Not angry, not hurt, just measuring. Then she looked back at Marcus. "You've already made your decision," she said. Her voice was calm, too calm. Marcus finally met her eyes. For a split second, something flickered there, something uncertain, but it passed quickly. "I did what was necessary," he replied. "You didn't contribute, you didn't adapt, you didn't fit." Linda nodded immediately. "Exactly. We gave you every opportunity, and you chose to stay small." The word hung in the air longer the room. Hannah glanced around the room. The house, the table, the people, every detail claimed by someone else. "Small," she repeated quietly. Vanessa smirked and lifted her phone. "This is almost sad," she said, angling the camera. "But honestly, it's kind of deserved." Marcus didn't stop her. That mattered more than anything else. Linda stood, picking up her wine glass. "You know what bothers me most?" she said as she walked toward Elena. "It's not that you failed, it's that you wasted his time." Elena didn't move. "Marcus could have built something real years ago," Linda continued. "Instead, he stayed stuck with someone who had nothing to offer him." She stopped right in front of Elena. Close enough to see every detail. Close enough to make it personal. And now, Linda said softly, "We're fixing that mistake." The wine came next, cold, sudden. It hit Elena's shoulder first, then slid down the front of her coat, dark red against pale fabric. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Vanessa laughed. "Oh my God," she said, still filming. Wow, that's exactly what this needed." Marcus exhaled through his nose. Not shocked, not angry, relieved, like something had finally been settled. Elena closed her eyes for a brief second. Then she opened them. She reached up, brushed a drop of wine from her sleeve, and let her hand fall back to her side. No shouting, no tears. That was the part none of them understood. Linda frowned slightly. "Well?" she said. "Aren't you going to say something?" Elena looked at her. Then at Marcus. Her gaze lingered there. 3 years. That was all it took. Not for love to disappear, but for truth to become impossible to ignore. "I think you've said enough for all of us," Elena replied. Her voice, it didn't need to. Vanessa tilted her head, amused. "Still acting like you have some kind of dignity," she said. "That's impressive." Elena almost smiled, almost. Marcus shifted in seat. "Let's not drag this out," he said. "It's over." "That's it." He said it like a business decision. "Clean, final, safe." Elena nodded once. "You're right," she said. Then she reached into her pocket. Not for anything dramatic, just her phone. She glanced at the screen briefly. No one could see what was there. A message. Unread, she locked it again. Not yet. She stepped back toward the door. Linda crossed her arms. Good, she said. At least you know when to leave. Elena paused with her hand on the handle. For the first time, something shifted. Not anger, something colder, something final. She turned her head slightly, just enough to look back at Marcus. I hope you remember this night, she said quietly. The room stilled. Marcus frowned. What does that mean? Elena held his gaze, and for a brief moment the confidence in his posture cracked, just slightly. Because when everything changes, she continued, this is the moment you chose. No one laughed this time, not even Vanessa. Elena opened the door and stepped out. The market closing echoed, longer than it should have. Inside, Marcus stared at the empty space where she had been, and for reasons he couldn't explain, his phone suddenly felt heavier in his pocket. Marcus didn't sleep much that night. Not because he regretted anything. At least, that's what he told himself. It was the silence that followed. After Elena walked out, the house felt different. Too still, too empty. Even with Linda pacing in the kitchen and Vanessa replaying the video on her phone with quiet amusement, something had shifted in a way Marcus couldn't name. He stood by the window for a long time, staring out at nothing. She's dramatic, Vanessa said from behind him. You saw that, right? That whole remember this night line? Please. Marcus didn't turn. She always had a flair for making things bigger than they were. Linda snorted. Bigger than they were? She's been pretending to be something she's not for years. Quiet, polite, submissive. It was all an act. That word lingered. Act. Marcus frowned slightly, but didn't respond. He reached into his pocket and felt his phone. For a second, he thought about checking it. He didn't. Instead, he walked back to the table, picked up his glass, and took a slow drink. It's done, he said. That's all that matters. Vanessa slipped her arm around him, satisfied. Exactly. You're free now. Free. That should have felt better. The next morning, the office felt off. Marcus noticed it the moment he stepped into the lobby. People were quieter. Conversations cut short when he walked by. A few faces he recognized avoided eye contact altogether. He brushed it off. Rumors spread fast in corporate spaces. Divorce. Personal drama. It was normal. Still, something about the atmosphere didn't sit right. Morning, he said to the receptionist. She hesitated before responding. Good morning, Mr. Reed. The pause was subtle, but it was there. Marcus continued toward the elevators, his jaw tightening just slightly. Inside the elevator, he checked his reflection. Suit perfect. Tie straight. Nothing out of place. Control, that's what mattered. When the doors opened on his floor, he stepped out expecting the usual rhythm, assistants moving quickly, phones ringing, screens lit with activity. Instead, there was tension. A cluster of people stood near the conference room, low voices, sharp glances. His assistant, Daniel, rushed toward him. You're here, Daniel said, a little too quickly. Marcus frowned, obviously. What's going on? Daniel hesitated. There's been some changes to the schedule. What kind of changes? Several meetings were canceled this morning, including the investor call. Marcus stopped walking. Canceled? By who? I'm not sure. It came from upstairs. Upstairs. That meant executive level. Marcus's expression hardened. Reschedule them. Immediately. Daniel swallowed. I tried. But they said to wait. Who said that? Daniel glanced toward the conference room, then lowered his voice. Legal was involved. That was new. Marcus felt a flicker of irritation. Legal doesn't cancel meetings without a reason. I know, Daniel said quietly. That's why. He didn't finish. Marcus didn't need him to. He walked past him, straight toward his office, pushing the door open harder than necessary. Inside, everything looked normal. Desks, screens, files. But his inbox wasn't. There were more emails than usual, several marked urgent. A few flagged from departments that didn't usually contact him directly. He sat down and opened the first one. Subject. Temporary hold. Strategic review. His brow furrowed. He opened another. Subject. Attendance required. Executive briefing, then another. Subject. HR notification. Internal compliance review. Marcus leaned back slightly, the tension building in his chest. This is ridiculous, he muttered. He reached for his phone this time. One missed call. Unknown number. And a voicemail. He stared at it for a second, then pressed play. Mr. Reed, this is Allison Grant from Corporate Legal. We need you to attend mandatory meeting at 11 a.m. regarding an ongoing ownership review. This is time sensitive. Please confirm your availability. Ownership review. Marcus sat up straighter. That didn't make sense. Ownership reviews didn't involve him. Not directly. He wasn't at that level. Not yet. His fingers tapped lightly against the desk as he replayed the message in his head. Something wasn't lining up. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Come in. Gerald stepped inside. Marcus's father looked different, not panicked, but unsettled. You got the notice? Gerald asked. Marcus nodded slowly. Yeah. You? Gerald exhaled. Same thing. Legal wants everyone in the senior chain present. Why? Gerald shook his head. No idea. But I don't like it. Neither did Marcus. For the first time since last night, a faint crack appeared in his certainty. This is probably just restructuring, Marcus said, more to himself than anyone else. Maybe, Gerald replied. But legal doesn't move like this unless something's already decided. That word again, decided. Marcus's jaw tightened. I'm not worried, he said firmly. Gerald studied him for a moment, then gave a short nod. You should be prepared anyway. After he left, Marcus leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. Prepared for what? He didn't have an answer. His eyes drifted back to his inbox. One email stood out. No subject line, no sender name he recognized. Just a document attached. He hesitated, then clicked. The file opened slowly. At first, it looked like any other corporate document. Formal structure. Legal formatting. Then his eyes landed on a section header. Ownership structure. Caldwell Holdings Caldwell. Marcus frowned. He'd heard that name before. Of course he had. Everyone in the company had. It was tied to upper-level operations, silent ownership layers, private control. Names that didn't appear often, names that didn't need to. He scrolled. His heartbeat picked up slightly, and then he saw it, a signature block, clean, precise. E. Caldwell. Marcus froze. For a second, his mind didn't connect it. Then something flickered. A memory, a name. He shook his head immediately. No, he muttered under his breath. That didn't make sense. It couldn't. Elena had nothing to do with this. She didn't even. His thoughts cut off. His phone buzzed in his hand, a new message. From Daniel. They moved the meeting up. It's starting in 10 minutes. Marcus stared at the screen, then back at the document, then at the name. Ia Caldwell. His grip tightened. And for the first time, he wasn't sure he understood the company he worked for. Marcus didn't wait. He grabbed his jacket, shoved his phone into his pocket, and headed straight for the executive floor. The elevator ride felt longer than usual, even though nothing had changed. Same mirrored walls, same quiet hum. But this time, he watched his own reflection more closely. There was a tension in his jaw he couldn't hide. E. Caldwell. The name kept circling in his head, refusing to settle into anything logical. He told himself it was coincidence, a common initial. A coincidence tied to a corporate structure he didn't fully understand. That was all. It had to be. When the elevator doors opened, the atmosphere hit him immediately. Different floor, different energy. This wasn't his level of the company. It was quieter, more controlled. Assistants spoke in low tones. Doors stayed closed. People here didn't rush. They waited. Marcus stepped out, scanning the hallway. Gerald was already there, standing near the conference room with two other executives Marcus recognized but rarely interacted with. All of them looked tense. You made it, Gerald said as Marcus approached. What is this? Marcus asked, keeping his voice low. What kind of ownership review pulls this many people in? Gerald shook his head. No idea. But legal's inside, and so is the board liaison. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Board liaison? That's what I said. That wasn't normal. Board-level reviews didn't involve mid-tier executives unless something structural was shifting. Something big. Marcus exhaled slowly, trying to steady himself. It's probably just restructuring, he said again, but the words sounded weaker this time. Gerald didn't argue. That was worse. The conference room doors opened before either of them could say anything else. All attendees, please come in, a woman's voice called. Marcus stepped inside. The room was already set. Long table, screens active. Documents placed neatly at each seat. At the far end sat two people Marcus didn't recognize, legal, and someone else. The second man didn't look like staff. He didn't carry himself like an employee either. No laptop open, no notes. Just sitting there, watching as people entered. Marcus felt that immediately. Power without explanation. He took his seat. glancing at the folder in front of him. His name was printed clearly on the tab. Everything about this had been prepared in advance. That meant decisions had already been made. The woman from legal stood once everyone was seated. "Thank you for coming on short notice," she said, her tone precise. "This meeting concerns an internal ownership review and compliance assessment related to Caldwell Holdings and its operational subsidiaries." Caldwell again. Marcus's fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the table. "We will be discussing structural oversight, decision authority, and recent documentation that requires immediate clarification," she continued. Gerald shifted beside him. "Clarification of what?" he asked. The woman didn't answer directly. "You'll each have an opportunity to review the materials provided." Marcus opened the folder. The first few pages were standard. Organizational charts, financial summaries, internal reporting structures. Nothing alarming until it changed. A section tab marked Executive Authority. Marcus flipped to it, his eyes scanned quickly, then slowed. Approval chains, final signatures, oversight permissions. The structure wasn't what he thought it was. Not even close. Several decisions he believed came from senior executives didn't. They routed somewhere else, higher, hidden. His pulse picked up slightly. "This structure reflects current authority distribution," the legal representative said, as if reading his thoughts, "including final approval channels for strategic decisions." Marcus looked up. "Who signs off on those approvals?" The room went quiet for a fraction of a second. Then the second man, the one who hadn't spoken, leaned forward slightly. "That's part of what we're clarifying today," he said calmly. His voice was measured, controlled. Marcus didn't like it. Gerald frowned. "Clarifying? That implies there's confusion." The man's gaze shifted briefly toward him. "There is." That word landed harder than expected. Marcus looked back down at the document. There it was again. The signature line, consistent across multiple approvals. E. Caldwell, his chest tightened. He flipped another page. Same name. Another same. Marcus felt a flicker of irritation now, pushing past uncertainty. "Who is this?" he asked, more sharply than before. "Why isn't this information transparent?" The legal representative answered this time. "Ownership structures at this level are not always public-facing. However, they are fully compliant with corporate governance." "That's not what I asked," Marcus said. "I asked who is making these decisions." The man at the end of the table watched him carefully, then said, "Someone with full authority to do so." Marcus leaned back, fussily, jaw tightening. "That doesn't answer anything." "No," the man agreed calmly. "It doesn't." That was deliberate. Marcus could feel it. Gerald spoke again, more cautious now. "Why are we being pulled into this?" "Because your positions are directly affected by the outcome of this review," the legal representative replied. "Affected." Marcus's focus sharpened immediately. "In what way?" "That depends on the findings." That wasn't an answer either. Marcus's frustration was building now, pushing through the confusion. He had worked for years to reach his position, built relationships, delivered results. He wasn't going to sit here and be treated like he didn't belong. "There's nothing to review," he said firmly. "Our division is performing. Our numbers are strong. There's no reason performance is not the issue," the man interrupted. Marcus stopped. The interruption was subtle, but it carried weight. "Then what is?" Marcus asked. The man held his gaze for a moment longer than necessary, then said, "Control." Silence followed, not loud, but heavy. Marcus felt something shift again. Control. He glanced down at the documents one more time, at the signature, at the name. E. Caldwell. A thought tried to surface again. He pushed it down immediately. It didn't make sense. It couldn't. His phone buzzed against the table. He ignored it. Then it buzzed again, and again. Finally, he glanced at the screen. Multiple messages. From Daniel. From HR. From an unknown number. One preview caught his eye. "Please review immediately." Marcus opened it. A single line appeared. "Executive presence confirmed. E. Caldwell will attend the next session in person." Marcus froze. The room suddenly felt smaller. And for the first time, he realized this wasn't just a review. It was a setup. Marcus didn't speak for the rest of the meeting. He didn't need to. The words on the screen were doing enough damage on their own. Control. Authority. Final approval. Every path led to the same place. Every decision, budgets, hiring freezes, acquisitions, internal promotions, ran through a layer he had never seen before. A layer that didn't report to him, didn't report to his father, didn't report to anyone in that room. It reported to one name, E. Caldwell. The legal representative continued outlining compliance procedures, but Marcus barely heard it anymore. His focus stayed locked on the documents in front of him, on the structure he had misunderstood for years. This wasn't just a company. It was something he had only been allowed to participate in, not control, never control. Given the current review, the woman said, all strategic decisions are temporarily paused until confirmation from ownership is formally acknowledged. Marcus looked up sharply. Paused? You're freezing operations? Not freezing, she corrected calmly. Holding for confirmation. That's the same thing. No, she said. It's accountability. The word hit harder than expected. Marcus leaned forward slightly. We have ongoing deals. Contracts in negotiation. You can't just... We can't, she interrupted. And we have the man at the end of the table didn't move. He didn't need to. Marcus felt the shift again. That quiet, invisible line between people who thought they had power and people who actually did. Gerald spoke next, slower this time. This confirmation. When does it happen? The legal representative checked her notes. Later today. Once ownership is present. Ownership, not executive, not board. Ownership. Marcus's grip tightened around his pen. His mind was still trying to connect the pieces, but they refused to settle into anything logical. Elena. The thought surfaced again. This time stronger. He pushed it down harder. No, that didn't make sense. It couldn't. Elena didn't even. His phone buzzed again. This time he didn't ignore it. A message from Vanessa. Call me. Something weird is happening. Marcus frowned and opened it. Another message followed immediately. My badge isn't working. They won't let me into my floor. He blinked. That didn't make sense either. He typed quickly. What do you mean? The reply came fast. Security says access is restricted. They're checking something. Marcus, what's going on? Marcus stared at the screen, then slowly looked back up. The meeting was still going, but now the room felt tighter, more controlled, like every move had already been calculated. He stood up suddenly. I need to step out. The legal representative didn't stop him. That alone told him something was wrong. He walked out into the hallway, pulling his phone to his ear. Vanessa answered immediately. Marcus, what is happening? They're treating me like I don't work here. Calm down, he said, though his own voice wasn't steady. It's probably just part of the review. A review doesn't lock people out, she snapped. I've been here 3 years. I have clearance, and now they're saying my access is under evaluation? What does that even mean? Marcus didn't have an answer. That was the problem. I'll figure it out, he said. Just wait. Wait for what? Vanessa cut him off. You're the one who told me everything was secure. That your position was stable. That your family, my family is stable, Marcus said, sharper than he intended. Silence followed. Then Vanessa lowered her voice. Then why does it feel like something is collapsing? Marcus closed his eyes briefly. Because it was. He just didn't understand how. I'll call you back, he said, ending the call before she could push further. He stood there for a moment, staring at the dark screen of his phone. Then he turned. Gerald was standing a few feet away. He must have stepped out too. What's going on? Gerald asked quietly. Marcus shook his head. I don't know, but Vanessa's access just got restrained. That's not random, he said. No, Marcus agreed. Neither of them said it out loud, but they both felt it. This wasn't about restructuring anymore. This was targeted. Gerald exhaled slowly. We need to be careful. Marcus let out a short, humorless breath. Careful? About what? We don't even know what we're dealing with. Gerald's gaze shifted toward the conference room door. Exactly. They went back inside. The atmosphere had changed again. More people were seated now, higher level. People Marcus had only seen in passing. The man at the end of the table hadn't moved, but now his attention was sharper, focused, waiting. The legal representative closed her folder. We will be pausing here, she said. The next session will begin once ownership arrives. Marcus felt his pulse spike again. Ownership, not a name, not a department, a person, someone who had been invisible until now, someone who had been making decisions without ever showing up until today. The room shifted slightly as people adjusted in their seats. No one spoke, no one needed to. The weight of anticipation filled the silence. Marcus glanced down at the documents one more time. E. Caldwell. The name felt different now, closer, more real. His mind ran through every possibility, every connection, every face he had seen in this company. None of them fit, none of them matched, which meant one thing. He had never been looking in the right direction. The door opened, not loudly, but enough to pull every eye in the room toward it. Marcus looked up, his breath caught, not because he recognized who walked in, but because of what happened next. The man at the end of the table, the one who hadn't moved, the one who had controlled the room without speaking, stood up immediately. Not casually, not politely, respectfully, like someone greeting authority. And suddenly, Marcus realized the room wasn't waiting for a meeting. It was waiting for someone who owned it. The room didn't breathe. It held itself in place, suspended between anticipation and something sharper. Marcus felt it before he understood it. Every eye turned toward the doorway. Not casually, not with curiosity, with recognition. Respect. Even the legal representative stepped slightly to the side. That was the first real warning. Marcus straightened unconsciously, his attention narrowing as the figure stepped inside. At first, it didn't register. The coat, the posture, the calm way she moved without rushing, without hesitation. Then it did. Not all at once, piece by piece. The way she didn't look around the room. The way no one questioned her presence. The way the man at the end of the table lowered his head slightly in acknowledgement. And then Elena stepped fully into the light. Marcus's mind rejected it instantly. No, that didn't make sense. His body reacted before his thoughts could catch up. He leaned forward slightly, as if distance might correct what he was seeing. Elena looked exactly the same quiet expression, same steady gaze. But everything around her had changed, or maybe it hadn't. Maybe he just hadn't seen it before. The man at the end of the table spoke first. "Miss Caldwell," he said, his tone precise. "We're ready when you are, Caldwell." The name hit the room like something physical. Marcus didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't think, because if he thought, it might become real. Elena gave a small nod. Not to Marcus, not to anyone he knew, to the room, to the people who had been waiting for her. She walked past him without stopping, not fast, not slow, deliberate, controlled. Marcus watched her take the seat at the head of the table, his seat, or what he thought had been his. Gerald shifted beside him, his hand tightening against the table. Marcus didn't look at him. He didn't want to see his father's face, didn't want confirmation. The legal representative spoke again, but her tone had changed. More formal, more precise. "As discussed, we will now proceed with confirmation of ownership authority." Elena placed a folder in front of her, opening it without hesitation. Every movement exact, every motion practiced, like she had done this before many times. Marcus's chest tightened. "You may begin," Elena said. Her voice was the same. Soft, controlled. But now it carried something else, authority, not claimed, assumed. The man at the end of the table stood. "For the record," he said, "this session confirms that primary ownership and final executive authority of Caldwell Holdings resides with Ms. Elena Caldwell." Marcus heard them. But they didn't settle, didn't connect, didn't fit into anything he understood. He stared at her, waiting. For her to deny it, to laugh, to correct it. She didn't. Instead, she turned a page in the folder and slid a document forward. "Continue," she said. The man nodded. "Documentation has been reviewed and verified. All strategic decisions over the past 5 years have been authorized under Ms. Caldwell's approval." 5 years. Marcus felt something crack. He leaned forward, his voice finally breaking through. "That's not possible." The room went still again. Elena didn't look at him immediately. That was worse than if she had. "You're saying," Marcus stopped, his words catching. "You're saying she's been, what, running this company? From where?" Elena closed the folder slowly. Then she looked at him, directly. No hesitation, no softness. "You were in the room," she said calmly. "You just weren't paying attention." The words landed harder than anything else. Marcus shook his head. "No, that's not you. This doesn't make sense. You didn't, you never, I never what?" She asked. Her tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. "You never showed up," he said. "You never. You lived like someone you could dismiss." Elena finished. Marcus stopped. The truth in that cut deeper than the accusation. Gerald spoke suddenly, his voice strained. Elena, if this is some kind of misunderstanding, it's not, she said. Simple. Final. The legal representative stepped in, sliding another document across the table. Ownership records, asset control structures, and executive authority logs are included in your folders, she said. All signatures correspond to Ms. Caldwell. Marcus didn't look down. He didn't want to see it again. Didn't want confirmation. Because confirmation meant everything he had believed was wrong. Vanessa, the house, his position, his confidence, all of it. Elena rested her hands lightly on the table. You built your career here, she said, her gaze still on Marcus. You built your identity around it. Her voice softened slightly, not with kindness, with clarity. But it was never yours. Marcus felt the room tilt slightly. You're lying, he said, but there was no weight behind it. Elena didn't respond. She didn't need to. The documents were enough. The room was enough. The way people were looking at her was enough. Marcus's phone buzzed again. He ignored it. Then it buzzed again and again. Finally, he grabbed it, more out of instinct than intention. Another message from Vanessa. They're escorting me out. His stomach dropped. They said my access is terminated pending investigation. Marcus stared at the screen, then slowly looked back up at Elena. She didn't react, didn't even glance at his phone, which meant she already knew. You're doing this, he said, his voice tightening. You're behind this. Elena tilted her head slightly. Behind what? She asked. The question wasn't innocent. It was precise. Calculated. Marcus pushed his chair back slightly, the sound sharp against the floor. You're freezing operations. You're locking people out. I'm reviewing what belongs to me, she said. The interruption was calm, absolute. Marcus stopped, because there was nothing in her tone to argue with. No anger, no revenge, just ownership. Real ownership. The kind he had never actually held. Silence stretched across the room again. Not uncertain this time, settled, final. Marcus looked at her, really looked at her for the first time, and saw it. Not the woman he had dismissed, not the woman he had humiliated, but someone who had been waiting, deciding, all along. His phone buzzed once more. This time, it wasn't Vanessa. It was a new message. From corporate HR, he opened it slowly and felt his chest tighten as he read the first line. Effective immediately, your position is under formal review pending executive decision. Marcus didn't look away from the screen. Because he already knew this wasn't the worst part. Not yet. Marcus didn't move. The message was still open in his hand, the words blurring slightly as his focus shifted back to Elena. She hadn't raised her voice, hadn't threatened, hadn't even looked satisfied. That was what unsettled him the most. This wasn't revenge. It was correction. Gerald was the first to break. This review, he said, forcing control into his voice. What exactly does it mean for our positions? Elena didn't answer immediately. She turned a page in her folder, scanning something briefly, then looked up again. Your positions were granted under operational performance, she said. Not ownership authority. Gerald's jaw tightened. We understand that. No, Elena said calmly. You didn't. Silence again. Heavy. Controlled. Marcus finally stood. The movement was abrupt, sharp enough to cut through the room's quiet. You're not just reviewing, he said. You're dismantling. Elena held his gaze. I'm evaluating, she corrected. That's not what this looked. That's because you're seeing it for the first time. The words landed harder than anything else she had said. Marcus stepped closer to the table, his voice tightening. You've been hiding this from all of us. Elena didn't deny it, yes. Simple. Direct. Marcus let out a short breath, almost a laugh, but there was no humor in it. So what? This was some kind of test? You lived like that, he gestured vaguely, frustration spilling over. Like you had nothing, just to see how we'd treat you? Her expression didn't change. I lived the way I chose to live, she said. What you chose to see was your decision. Marcus stopped. Because he couldn't argue with that, not honestly. Gerald stepped in again, more urgent now. Elena, we've worked for this company for years. Whatever this is, there has to be a way to… To what? She asked. Her tone wasn't sharp. But it cut, anyway. To fix this, Gerald said. Elena looked at him for a moment. This isn't new, she said. Nothing here started today. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Because she was right, the signs had been there. He just hadn't cared to notice them. The way senior executives deferred decisions, The way certain approvals never came from visible leadership. The way Elena had known things, details about deals, timelines, risks. Assumed she was guessing. Assumed she was trying to sound more informed than she was. He swallowed. "You could have told me," he said, quieter now. Elena's eyes held his. "I could have," she agreed. That was all she said, and somehow it said everything. Marcus looked away first, because now the weight of it was starting to settle, not just what she was, but what he had been, wrong. Not just about her, about everything. The legal representative cleared her throat, bringing the room back to structure. "We will proceed with individual assessments," she said. "Each of you will receive formal notice regarding your roles, responsibilities, and any compliance concerns." Compliance. Marcus stiffened again. "What concerns?" he asked. The legal representative didn't hesitate. "That depends on documented behavior and decision-making within your divisions." Marcus' mind moved quickly now. Too quickly. Because there were things, decisions he had made. Shortcuts, favors, Vanessa. He felt it then, not just uncertainty. Risk. "You're reviewing everything?" he asked. "Yes." "How far back?" "As far as necessary." Marcus exhaled slowly, tension tightening through his shoulders. This wasn't just about authority. It was about exposure. Gerald spoke again, more carefully this time. "And during this process, operations will continue under interim oversight," the legal representative replied. "Final decisions require Ms. Caldwell's approval." Marcus glanced at Elena again. She didn't react, didn't claim it, didn't emphasize it. She just accepted it, like it had always been hers. Because it had. Vessa's name flashed through his mind again. Her messages, her access, her panic. "You're targeting people," he said suddenly. Elena's gaze shifted to him. "People who violated policy," she said. Marcus felt the hit immediately. "And you think this is fair?" he asked. "I think it's accurate." The room held that answer. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, pacing once before stopping again. "You're going to tear everything down," he said. "No," Elena replied. "I'm deciding what stays." That was worse. Because it meant some things wouldn't. His phone buzzed again. He didn't want to check it, but he did. Another message. From HR. He opened it. His breath slowed as he read. "Formal review includes potential suspension of decision-making authority effective immediately." Marcus lowered the phone slowly. Suspension, not yet termination. But close. Too close. He looked at Elena again. For the first time, not as his ex-wife. Not as someone he had dismissed, but as the person holding the outcome of everything he had built. "You're not going to destroy this company," he said quietly. Elena met his gaze. "I built it to last," she replied. Not defensive, not emotional, just true. Marcus felt something collapse inside that certainty, because he finally understood. This wasn't about destroying anything. It was about removing people who never belonged in control, and he might be one of them. The legal representative began distributing additional documents. "Please review your individual notices," she said. Marcus didn't move, didn't reach for the paper immediately, because he already knew whatever was written there was only the beginning. His phone buzzed one last time. A new message, different sender, unknown number. He hesitated, then opened it. A single line. "Your access to executive systems has been restricted pending final authorization." Marcus stared at the screen, then slowly looked up at Elena. She wasn't watching him. She didn't need to, because for the first time, Marcus realized he wasn't part of the room anymore. He was waiting for permission to stay. Marcus didn't sit down again. He couldn't. The chair behind him felt irrelevant now, like it belonged to someone else, someone who still had a place in that room. He wasn't sure he did anymore. Around him, papers shifted. Quiet movements. People reading documents they suddenly understood mattered more than anything they had signed before. Gerald picked up his notice slowly. Marcus didn't look at it. He didn't need to see his father's reaction to know it wasn't good. "What does this mean?" Gerald asked finally, his voice lower than Marcus had ever heard it. The legal representative answered without hesitation. "It means your position is under review pending compliance findings and executive approval." Gerald's hand tightened around the document. "After 30 years?" Elena didn't interrupt. She didn't soften it either. Because time didn't matter anymore, only structure did. Marcus forced himself to move, finally reaching for his own document. The paper felt heavier than it should have. He opened it. His eyes scanned quickly at first, then slowed, then stopped. There it was. Language he couldn't ignore. Pending investigation of internal conduct, review of executive decision-making authority, temporary suspension of approval rights. Marcus exhaled sharply through his nose. This is a joke, he muttered. But it wasn't. He knew it wasn't. Elena hadn't moved. She sat at the head of the table, reviewing her own notes, occasionally signing something, occasionally passing documents back toward legal. Like this was routine. Like this wasn't the moment his entire career was unraveling. "You're using technicalities," Marcus said suddenly. His voice cut through the room again. Elena looked up. Not surprised, not defensive, just attentive. "Technicalities?" she repeated. Marcus stepped closer, document still in his hand, compliance reviews. "Internal conduct. You're dressing this up like it's objective, but it's not. This is personal." A few heads shifted. Elena held his gaze. "If it were personal," she said, "you wouldn't be in this room." The answer landed clean, precise. Marcus felt it, because part of him knew she was right. If she had wanted revenge, this would look very different. That realization didn't make it easier, it made it worse. Gerald spoke again, more carefully this time. "There has to be a process for this." "There is," the legal representative said, "and it's being followed." Marcus let out a short breath, running a hand through his hair again. "So what? We just sit here while you decide who stays and who goes?" "No," Elena said. Marcus looked at her. "You decide that," she continued. "With everything you've already done." That hit harder than anything else in the room, because it shifted the weight. From her, back to him. Marcus's mind raced. Decisions, conversations, Vanessa. Shortcuts he had justified, things that had felt small at the time. Necessary, now they weren't small anymore. They were documented, evaluated, measured. His phone buzzed again. This time, he didn't hesitate. He opened the message immediately. Vanessa again. "They just told me I'm under investigation." His stomach dropped. "For what?" he typed quickly. The reply came slower this time. "I don't know. They mentioned conflict of interest." "Marcus, what did you tell them?" Marcus froze. Conflict of interest. His grip tightened on the phone. He hadn't told them anything. Which meant they already knew. He looked up slowly, at Elena. She wasn't watching him. She didn't need to. Because this wasn't about catching him in the moment. It was about everything that had already been recorded, documented, waiting. "You've been building this," Marcus said quietly. Elena didn't deny it. "I've been maintaining it," she corrected. "That's not the same thing." "No," she said. "It's more consistent." Marcus shook his head, a faint edge of disbelief slipping through. "You let this happen," I observed, she said. "You let it happen," he repeated, more sharply now. Elena leaned back slightly in her chair. "For 3 years," she said, "you had access to everything you needed to be better." Marcus stopped because there was no anger in her voice, only clarity. "You didn't need me to tell you how to treat people," she continued. "You didn't need to know who I was to act with integrity." The words settled into the room like something heavy and permanent. Marcus looked away, because now he understood the part that mattered most. This wasn't about her being powerful. It was about him choosing to be careless when he thought she wasn't. Gerald lowered himself into his chair, finally, the document still in his hands. "What happens next?" he asked. The legal representative answered. "Each case will be reviewed individually. Decisions will be issued based on findings. And until then," Gerald pressed, "access remains restricted, authority remains suspended." Marcus let out a slow breath. Restricted. Suspended. Waiting. He had spent years building momentum. Now everything was paused by someone he had dismissed as irrelevant. His phone buzzed again. Different sender this time. Unknown number. He opened it slowly. A message. Short. Direct. "You are required to attend a secondary review session at 4 p.m. with legal and executive oversight." Marcus stared at it. Secondary review. Not optional, not delayed. Immediate. He looked back at Elena. For a second, just a second, he almost said something different, something real. But it passed. Replaced by something else. Pride. Regret. He couldn't tell the difference anymore. Elena closed her folder. The sound was quiet, but final. "This session is over," she said. No one argued. No one asked questions, because everyone understood this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of everything being decided. Marcus didn't move right away. Neither did Gerald. Around them, people started to leave slowly, carrying documents that now defined their futures. Marcus looked down at his own paper one more time, then folded it once, carefully, like control still mattered. When he looked up again, Elena was already standing, already turning toward the door, not looking back, not waiting. And for the first time, Marcus realized something he hadn't been ready to admit before. He wasn't trying to win anymore. He was trying not to lose everything. His phone buzzed one last time. He didn't want to check, but he did. Another message, from corporate systems. He opened it and felt the final shift hit him. Your executive credentials have been temporarily revoked pending further notice. Marcus stared at the words, then slowly lifted his head toward the door Elena had just walked through. Because now he knew exactly who was her soul and what happened next, and he wasn't on her side anymore. Marcus waited outside her office for nearly 20 minutes before the assistant finally nodded and let him in. The room was quiet, clean, minimal, nothing excessive, nothing loud, just glass, steel, and the kind of stillness that came from control. Elena stood by the window, looking out over the city. She didn't turn when he walked in. For a moment, he just stood there, unsure how to begin. That had never happened before. He had always known what to say, always believed he was the one in control of the conversation. Now he wasn't even sure he deserved to be in the room. Elena, he said finally. She didn't respond right away. Then, slowly she turned. Not cold, not angry, just distant. I don't have much time, she said. The words were simple, professional. Final. Marcus nodded, though something in his chest tightened. I won't take long. He stepped forward, stopping a few feet from her desk, close enough to speak, not close enough to pretend anything was the same. I didn't know, he said. The words came out rougher than he expected, less certain. Elena watched him. I know, she said. That wasn't comfort. It was confirmation, Marcus swallowed. If I had known, you would have treated me differently, she finished. He stopped, because that was exactly what he was about to say, and hearing it out loud made it sound worse than he expected. I would have understood, he tried instead. Elena shook her head slightly. No, would have adjusted. That landed deeper, because it was true. Marcus held slowly, running a hand over his face. I made mistakes, yes. No hesitation, softening. Just truth. He nodded once, forcing himself to stay steady. Then let me fix them. Elena didn't move. Fix what? She asked. Marcus stepped closer, his voice tightening. Everything. The way I handled things. The way I treated you. The divorce. That's already done, she said. I can reverse it, he insisted. We can. No. The word was quiet, but absolute. Marcus froze. Elena held his gaze. You don't get to undo something just because you understand it now, she said. Understanding doesn't erase the choice you made. Marcus felt the weight of that settle into him. Because there was no argument, only consequence. I didn't know who you were, he said again, softer this time. Elena stepped away from the window, finally closing the distance between them. That was the point, she said. He looked at her, confusion flickering again. I didn't hide it to trap you, she continued. I hid it because I wanted to know if I could be loved without it. The words were calm, but there was something underneath them. Something older, more tired. I wanted a normal life, she said. A relationship that wasn't built on numbers, titles, or expectations. Just two people choosing each other. Marcus's chest tightened. And I thought I had that, she added. That was the first time her voice shifted, not louder. Marcus felt it, because now he understood what he had actually broken. Not her status, not her position, her belief. I chose wrong, he said quietly. Elena didn't deny it. Yes, another clean answer. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, then opened them again. I can change. Elena studied him for a moment, then shook her head. Maybe, she said, but not with me. The finality in her voice didn't feel cruel. It felt resolved. Marcus felt something collapse in his chest. Not anger, not frustration, just loss. I would have stayed, he said, almost to himself, if I had known. Elena looked at him carefully. That's exactly why I never told you, she said. Silence filled the space between them. Because now he understood the part that mattered most. It was never about her being powerful. It was about him only valuing her when she was. Marcus looked down, then back up again. There was nothing left to argue, nothing left to fix, only something left to accept. I'm sorry, he said. This time, it wasn't defensive, it wasn't strategic. It was just honest. Elena nodded once. I know. She walked past him then, toward the door, not rushing, not hesitating, just moving forward. Marcus didn't stop her, not shout out, because for the first time he understood that wanting her back wasn't enough. Not anymore. At the door, Elena paused. Not to look at him, but just long enough to breathe. Then she stepped out, leaving everything behind that no longer belonged to her. She didn't walk away like someone powerful. She didn't walk away like someone who had won. She walked away like someone who had finally chosen herself, and that was worth more than anything she had ever owned. If you've ever been underestimated, you already know. Silence is not weakness.